multiplayer, first-person shooter, campaigns. The schlocky action cinema of the video game art form. Sometimes these campaigns are great, featuring an over-the-top plot, amazing spectacle, and charismatic characters. And other times they are very, very bad, with a lack of variety, wooden characters, and a plot which you could predict from the very first mission. Which leaves you asking yourself, why did they even bother? So I am an enjoyer of the schlocky action cinema, as well as the first-person shooter campaign. To me, they feel like interactive movies, putting yourself in the shoes of a soldier fighting to save the world from a deadly threat. That sort of melodramatic fantasy has always found its way into my guilty pleasures. I was a big COD campaign enjoyer, although they have lost me in recent years, but that's a tale for another time. Some of the Call of Duty campaigns, especially the early ones, I believe are actually just great, and don't require the guilty pleasure justification tag to it. So what I'm saying is that I have a lot more tolerance to what a lot of people may consider dumb and stupid fun. Whether that be because in my teen years I just watched a lot of Jason Statham action films, and my favourite film used to be the A-Team remake because it was the first action film I saw in cinemas. You can do what you want with that information. I'm not actually proud of it. I don't know. Actually, you know what? I am. Would anyone care for a cargo crate find the ball game?
It's a trap! Hold back! Hold back! Get the hell out!
I can very easily suspend my disbelief when watching or playing these kind of experiences, just allowing myself to feel rather than think too deeply about it. But that obviously depends on the project itself. You know, if I was watching a schlocky action film like The Expendables 2, then I wouldn't really think too much about it. Like, you know, what's in the mise-en-scène of this scene where he kicks a knife into someone's chest? But then you have something like Oppenheimer, which is supposed to be taken in and thought about and interpreted. It just depends on the project. So when it was announced that Battlefield 6 will have a campaign, a first for the series since Battlefield 5, as well as a return to a more modern setting, I was probably one of the only people who was actually excited for the campaign. Battlefield campaigns have never exactly been high art, as it were, but they are always well-told stories, if a little basic, with distinct characters and plenty of that classic Battlefield spectacle. The highlights in there definitely being Battlefield 1 and its representation of World War I, all of that sort of stuff. They know what they're doing when they want to do it. You know, it depends on the setting and just the sort of vibe that they're going for as well. And the Battlefield campaigns especially are very good at fulfilling every facet of my guilty pleasures. And then pre the release of Battlefield 6, there was a lot of discussion about IGN's review of Battlefield's campaign, giving it a 5 out of 10. And I thought to myself, IGN don't know what they're talking about these days, you know, they're has-beens. I mean, they gave Modern Warfare 3's campaign a 4 out of 10, so surely it's not just one step above that, surely? I'm sure I'll still think it's fun. And, well, I think they were kind of right, sort of. So basically there's this private military corporation called Pax Armata, led by some ginger Scottish bloke who had his face burnt off because, you know, reasons. And they don't really like NATO, so they build their strength by whittling down countries until they hire them as their military, basically absorbing them into Pax. But then Pax blow up a US military base in Georgia, just before the country was supposed to be handed over peacefully in order to test their military firsthand and also capture some tech. This is where we meet Dylan Murphy, the cool guy we'll be playing as for most of the campaign, and you watch your squad get put in a clip, and that makes him very mad. You then team up with other cool guys and work to stop Pax from sparking World War III between the NATO countries who are still loyal and the other nations which have changed sides due to Pax changing their belief and thinking that NATO just can't really hack it anymore. Okay, so first of all, I never like it that nowadays developers or publishers are so afraid of offending people that they have to make up a very sort of convoluted and frankly unbelievable faction or nation, with just the aim to not upset or offend anyone. And in a way, Pax Armata is interesting, which I'll talk about later, but I sort of just long for the days of a more realistic or tangible geopolitical nature of the war between nations. I mean, look at Battlefield 4. They weren't afraid to pin China as the baddies to the extent that parts, or if not all of that game, were banned in that country. I'm not saying that the narrative team should strive to get banned in a certain country, but just something a little bit more realistic would be nice. I think when these fictitious nations are done well and explained well and feel believable, they do work. But, you know, call it personal preference, I guess. The actual narrative itself, it's fine. It's nothing to really write home about. It does have some highlights though. It's got a pretty interesting non-linear structure to it, which it reminded me a lot of Battlefield 3. In this instance, Murphy and the squad interrogate Mills, their CIA contact who puts them on a lot of their missions, as you piece together the events of the conflict, flashing back to the big battles as you go on. I do like this. Similar with Battlefield 3, it was a little confusing at first because it does jump around a lot and it doesn't really let you take in the dates. They're very small in the top left-hand corner, so I was like, where are we? When is this happening? And it does at times just feel a bit unnecessarily complicated. Fighting through the various theatres of war, as it were, and attempting to stop Pax Armata's forces advancing on whichever country they are trying to blow up is fun. But just doesn't really feel as interesting due to the more fictional nature of the enemy. As I said, the story is a little unnecessarily complex at first, jumping around events which partly cross over at points as well. But I found that I was only really following what was going on around the halfway point, but that might just be my fault for not paying enough attention. But at that point, I was definitely invested. I wanted to see where this would go or how this conflict would be resolved. I was interested to see what would happen with Kincaid, and after a certain character death, I was a bit like, oh, okay, things are happening, things feel interesting, things are progressing, there's a more tangible reason to be involved in this conflict. But after all the running and gunning around in the various countries, you think there will be quite a satisfying conclusion. But then the ending just kind of... So, minor spoilers ahead, I suppose. Towards the end, you piece together that Pax Armata were pretty much a CIA design, giving a reason for NATO to exist by funding and creating a controlled big bad for people to get behind, unifying the NATO states. But then Pax goes rogue and just blows lots of stuff up and has bigger plans of the world domination variety. This is where that ginger bloke comes into play, Kincaid, who became increasingly disturbed by the government's use of Pax to manipulate conflicts and stage false flag operations. I honestly find the story of how Pax became the private military nation more interesting than anything else really told here. I mean, it's completely and utterly ridiculous, but my friends, I like ridiculous.
Sweetheart, we're married.
Consider that a divorce.
But the ending was where it sort of lost me, really, as I found it rather unsatisfying, leaving a lot of unanswered questions and many threads open for potentially maybe a sequel, I think. But I swear to God, I bet it's going to end up like the more modern Call of Duty campaigns, where the story just continues during the Battle Royale seasons. And my God, I hate this approach. Having the continuation or conclusion of your main narrative be drip fed for a game mode which a percentage of people won't play is just so dead. I mean, I played a fair bit of Warzone back when Modern Warfare 2019 came out, because obviously COVID and such, but as it went on, I think it was Modern Warfare 2, when you kill this guy called Graves, and then he gets brought back during the Warzone seasons.
Well, I wasn't in that tank. I wasn't in that tank.
Bullshit.
And I didn't enjoy Warzone in Modern Warfare 2. I thought it was fucking dreadful. And that time passed. But jumping into Modern Warfare 3's campaign, I was like, why? How is he alive? And then he's just got some rubbish excuse like, oh, I wasn't in that tank. Like, what?
Well, I wasn't in that tank.
It really did ruin the new gen Modern Warfare story for me, which initially I loved. I absolutely loved it, especially Modern Warfare 2019 story. Bringing back characters which died in the campaign, friend or foe, through this way is just very unsatisfying to me. Why can't they just tell a contained story in the campaign like they did for like 20 years? I mean, we're going slightly off topic. I just hope that the Battlefield team just don't do this, because I know recently they have been trying to appeal to the Call of Duty community because EA want the absolutely ridiculous 100 million players because they want to be like the next Fortnite. But please, that is not a trend that you need to follow. So in terms of its narrative, Battlefield 6 gets a big old tick in the box for being extremely over the top and ridiculous. Although it does at times get lost in the confusing structure, it did sometimes just too much complexity. Attaching myself more to the general idea of the conflict rather than what is actually happening in some instances. But overall, I thought it was decent. It did the job. Battlefield is known for its destruction and spectacle, feeling like the player is in a movie with the amazing sound design and visuals. Having that feeling in effect in a multiplayer setting is already insanely impressive. So for me, there is a sort of expectation that the more scripted sequences in a crafted campaign would be even better. And yeah, things do in fact go boom. During the campaign, you'll be fighting through all different kinds of areas with your squad, from storming the beaches of Gibraltar and the wide open spaces of Tajikistan, to the busy streets and compact apartments of Brooklyn, all while shrapnel and bullets and metal fly around you with the punchy and bombastic soundtrack from Jackman of like Uncharted fame. He's a great composer, making for a beautiful symphony of destruction and chaos. The sequence of missions in Brooklyn were a particular standout to me, as you really feel the escalation of the conflict. You know, the narrative threat is clearly explained, stop the missiles, and the continual step up from the battle to battle it's just masterful. Starting off with a somewhat slower infiltration into some apartment blocks before the shit hits the fan, searching for a suspected pack cell in the area, but then a pack's force is sent to clean house by Kincaid. Walls crumbling around you and people getting lead surgically placed into their skulls. This was just such a cool sequence, and not to mention plenty of hammer time. After that, you are chasing a train through the tunnels before it reaches its target, calling in a strike to blow up a bridge as you scale the wreckage to stop the strike. This sequence especially was absolutely amazing. I loved it. Just sheer action bliss with high and tangible stakes. But then you find out the president is in the area, so the next part is defending the man himself and getting him to an extraction point. Just the constant building on each other. It was all fantastic. You know, these types of sequences are the reason I enjoy these campaigns. They're so absolutely ridiculous to an extent that films can't pull these things off without, you know, doing animation. But in a video game, they can do it all, and you're there in it as well. Just that kind of agency of you being the soldier that is trying to do these things, the feeling of being in that situation, just it transpires a movie and a television show. Variety is definitely important, and it's not all run and gun. There is a bit of variety there. There is a mission that takes you through a night raid in Cairo as you attempt to find a high-value target who has information on the pack's movement. Stealth in this situation is paramount here as you avoid detection from the pack's forces and dispatch them with blades when you can. But it's not long until you are fending off a hefty amount of pack's forces as the mission progresses. So there is plenty of spectacle to keep the adrenaline pumping. However, there isn't really a lot of variety. Sure, the diverse settings keep things looking fresh, but the repetitive mission objectives in some of the other missions, like destroy 3 AA guns, or destroy some SAM sites, It's just pretty uninventive and lacks the sort of instant agency and stakes when being compared to "Stop those missiles, or all of you New York is gonna be a goddamn pile of rubble." And "Oh my god, they're trying to kill the president, stop them from doing that, as that would be really bad." And also, only like one tank mission. It just feels very disjointed from the main campaign structure and kind of just comes out of nowhere. I was hoping for a little bit more of vehicle variety here, such as that amazing jet mission in Battlefield 3, which had you take off from an aircraft carrier, fight some enemy jets, and then do a bombing strike on an airbase. It takes advantage of the Battlefield sandbox that has been created here, the multi-sort of vehicular warfare, as well as being a boots-on-the-ground soldier. This sort of variety in gameplay is definitely felt here in some instances, although the gunplay and destruction make for a riveting experience. It sort of just left me wanting a bit more. In the penultimate mission of the campaign in Tajikistan, you take control of the team's recon, Gecko, and this is where you are instructed to destroy some SAM sites and then blow up a dam, you know, standard stuff. For me, this mission was kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, it does open up the Battlefield sandbox of various vehicles to use and guns and approaches that you can take to blow these things up, giving you a fair bit of choice and variety on how you wish to approach that objective. But on the other hand, it sort of feels like those fucking dreadful combat missions from MW3. I feel like this definitely comes down to personal preference more than the other aspects, as I can definitely see both sides. I can see the positives and negatives. But thankfully, they weren't as awful as the MW3 missions, as it didn't feel like a desperate attempt to pad out runtime compared to MW3. But part of me drew too many comparisons to them to not mention. Personally, I do prefer more linear missions in this type of campaign. I feel like when they open these things up, it sort of ruins the flow of the campaign a little bit, I guess, depending on the narrative that's being told. But I just found this mission was a bit of a mixed bag. I liked it, but at the same time, I didn't. I just prefer a much more focused and linear campaign in this instance. With the new engine and visuals, I feel like there was a big missed opportunity to really flex the new tech of the Battlefield team and what they had developed here in terms of its visuals. Although the destruction is absolutely gorgeous, it doesn't take advantage, like I said, it doesn't take advantage of the sandbox which Battlefield is known for. And speaking of missed opportunities, this is where I really think Battlefield 6's campaign drops the ball, and it's with the characters which make up the ragtag squad of Marines you'll be fighting with. They aren't bad characters, they aren't subjected to that typical cringe dialogue and terrible attempts at being funny or anything like that. They just aren't very interesting. Like I said before, to make a good shooter campaign like this work, you need to have spectacle, which they do have, an epic story, which they do have, and some good characters to tie it all together. And to me, the characters are one of the most important parts to make all the other aspects work in an effective way. I mean, sure, fighting through the PAX military base in the finale is great, and the spectacle is there, but I just don't feel as much as I'd want to. I'd love to be attached to these characters, and in Murphy's final "let's go get them" speech, I just don't really feel anything towards these characters. Interesting, standout characters are what really pull me into these types of experiences. For example, we'll say Captain Price from both of the Modern Warfare versions, to be fair.
On your feet, soldier! We are leaving!
They don't need to be three-dimensional characters as they are deconstructed over the course of the campaign. But Price stands out as he is just a badass guy who says cool lines and does cool things while looking cool.
At the end of the day, someone has to make the enemy scared of the dark. We get dirty, and the world stays clean. That's the mission.
You can just feel the history and the experience in everything that he does, and his willingness to do what's necessary and get his hands dirty should the situation call for it. And to bring it back to a Battlefield campaign, I'd say the characterization is done better with Irish and Pac in Battlefield 4. Both of them sort of bantering with each other in a way which feels natural rather than forced.
Are you fucking kidding me? What? I love this song. It's a good freaking song.
As well as when Irish takes on the refugees without authorization, taking the potential hit from the higher-ups to save innocent civilians caught in the conflict. Although this characterization isn't exactly groundbreaking, it does tell you something about Irish specifically and the type of person he is. It's at least something to latch onto to make you feel attached to him when you have to, make the choice between who dies at the end. Spoilers, by the way. But I mean, sorry Irish, I do kind of want that M249B.
I will remember you.
But here the characters, they're just very flat. Murphy is cool. It was a great way to try and motivate the player by having them directly involved in the situation, which was the catalyst for both the main conflict between Pax and NATO, as well as Murphy's motivation. But, that's really it. You get the odd nitbit here and there about some of the characters' pasts, and some personality does shine through, especially with Lopez.
Join the Marines, they said. You'll see the world, they said.
Here we go.
But it's not enough for me to become invested in these characters. They all just feel very one note. The Gecko, the sniper, what a cool concept, but it's just, there's no exploration of who she is, and I didn't really pick up on anything. And it's the same with Carter. Carter has a direct tie to Kincaid, the main villain, as I believe they did ops together back in the day, and Carter sort of turned his back on Kincaid. And that is cool, but the thing is, it's just not really explored a lot. There is a sort of anger that Kincaid has towards Carter, and it's demonstrated in some of the sequences, but there's not really any other sort of development. These are just fellas, and that just love, they're military people. There's not really an explanation of their characteristics or who they are, their likes and dislikes. It's so focused on the over-the-top ridiculous plot and trying to be somewhat complex for complexity's sake that they don't really have a look at the people that are in the fight as well. The world itself just kind of feels empty as well. There are sequences, especially in Brooklyn, where you would think that these military people would be trying to get people out of there, rescue a few civilians and show that they care about the people that they're fighting for, but there's no real interaction in that way. It is just blow this shit up and kill that guy. This is why I am a firm believer of making likable and just like characters that you want to get attached to in these kind of campaigns, because although the plot might be absolutely ridiculous and at times not make any sense, at least you then can attach yourself to some of these characters. You care about what happens to them and if they get their revenge or anything like that. But here, sadly, it's just not done as well as I would have liked to see here. Battlefield 6's campaign isn't anything groundbreaking, nor is it terrible. It sits somewhere in the middle. It's a short yet exciting romp coming in around 4 to 5 hours, but with its incredible gunplay and great set pieces and just fantastic visuals, it does feel a little hollow. But in terms of what I wanted from it, it definitely served its purpose. However, it may just be sort of my fault for wishing for more characterization with the squad. So no, I would probably not give it the IGN 5 out of 10. More like a low 7. It was undisputably very fun. Like I said before, I feel like these sorts of campaigns are more about the feeling rather than the thinking, which works very well for me. I think what is great as well is that I don't think it takes itself too seriously when being compared to something like Modern Warfare 2019, which made many points about not being your granddad's Call of Duty because now we're going to show people blowing up again. But Battlefield 6's campaign sits nicely in the good but not great category. And it helps by not being overly dark and serious, as that would have made for just something far less enjoyable. I can definitely see an argument for this being a 5 out of 10 for some people. And after reading through IGN's review, despite the several contradictory statements, some of the reviewers' points I do actually agree with. But as it is with anything, your enjoyment of these sorts of experiences depends on the player. If you go into this campaign expecting for something that will revolutionize the shooter campaign, then you're not going to get that. But if you're like me, and you went into this campaign expecting a modern military shooter campaign with some great spectacle, then you will be served well. It's certainly not the best of the franchise, and the war with Pax Armata and saving the president aren't exactly things I'll be telling my grandkids. But overall, despite its shortcomings, it still does get a thumbs up from me. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little video. Like I said, these kind of campaigns really are a guilty pleasure of mine. I absolutely love most of the Call of Duty campaigns. They're just absolutely ridiculous, and I look forward to potentially making a video on a few of them. But yeah, I'm absolutely loving the multiplayer. It really does feel like Battlefield 6 is, well, Battlefield is back, you know. DICE have really outdone themselves with this one. There is definitely some work that needs to be done. I feel like the maps are probably my biggest point of contention because they are quite sort of small. They're very contained, almost feeling like a mixture of Call of Duty maps. But overall, Battlefield 6 so far has been a really great experience, and I look forward to what they do later as the seasons progress. But again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and stick around because there's obviously going to be more to come. Cheers for now.